Well, now EU leaders have gathered in Latvia for a summit focusing on increased economic and political ties with former Soviet states. Well, it was back in 2013 at the same summit that then Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych balked at signing an EU partnership deal. Well, that refusal eventually led to his ouster and the current Ukrainian crisis. The partnership aims to reward Eastern European countries that have made democratic gains. Here's German Chancellor Angela Merkel.
Certain countries like Ukraine and Georgia are hoping to increase freedom of movement for their people. We have yet to propose measures that will enable that. The European Commission will evaluate at the end of this year whether a pilot program has been successful and possibly announce further concrete measures.
All right, for more on the summit, we can cross now to France 24's Christopher Robate, who's standing by for us in Riga. Christophe, what do you have for us?
Well, Molly, it's a very difficult balancing act for the European Union, of course, because on the one hand, they want to give assurances to the Russians that this is not a summit aimed at Russia. It's not an anti-Russian summit. It's not about redrawing some dividing lines in Europe. At the same time, they want to send a message to those countries, particularly Georgia, Ukraine and Moldova, that are really eager to move closer to Europe, that Europe is still indeed determined to help them. Very little has come out, though. EU leaders are starting to leave as we speak. For instance, on the issue of visa, that's something that is very dear to the hearts of the Ukrainians and the Georgians. No major announcements. As you know, well, the Georgians and the Ukrainians, they want to be allowed to travel freely to Europe without having to request a visa. So very mixed feelings, I should say, and the danger is that a number of delegations, the Moldovans, the Georgians and the Ukrainians, may leave Riga feeling that Europe has let them somehow behind. But the Europeans insist that it's not the case and that Europe stands firm behind those countries. I have to say there are other countries participating in this summit, Belarus, Azerbaijan and Armenia. They have a completely diverging view on what they expect from Europe. Two of them, for instance, have already joined an alliance with Russia, the so-called Eurasian Economic Alliance Union. So as you see, it's not a homogeneous pack, but those who are very much willing to move closer to Europe might feel somehow disappointed.
Well, that being said, that you're saying that perhaps they will feel disappointed. We've heard in the past, Christophe, the German Chancellor saying that there's no sphere of influence, but you clearly have even simply outlined it right there, that certainly there are some states, some countries there leaning a bit more towards Russia. And that being said, and we've even seen the fact that Merkel has reiterated on a number of times saying that the summit is not anti-Kremlin, anti-Moscow. But really, in many ways, we're seeing the behavior. It does suggest that there are indeed spheres of influence.
Well, you could look at it like that, but I don't think that's the perception from a European point of view. And I think that most leaders hadn't expected, to be honest, that the summit back in 2013 would lead to what we see today in Ukraine. And they certainly feel that they're not responsible for it. They feel that it's Moscow's aggressive response to the crisis in Ukraine which led us to the current situation. Having said that, they indeed want to make sure that Russia doesn't feel that these initiatives, these summits, are a sort of provocation. Talking about spheres of influence, as you rightly pointed out, well, you have really two blocks here. Armenia, Azerbaijan and Belarus are very much connected to Russia. But what's new in Europe's narrative is that they don't want a one-size-fits-all approach for all these countries. And they say, for instance, in the case of Armenia, it's very well. You can have very close ties with Russia. You can be a member of the Eurasian Economic Union, and at the same time try to forge new ties with Europe. So it's not a situation where you have to choose either. You can have relations with both sides. That's the message that the Europeans try to convey. One last thing on membership. Merkel made it absolutely clear that the aim of the Eastern Partnership is not for these countries to join the European Union. It was never promised to them, but it's really about economic, political and cultural cooperation. And I think what these countries, at least those who are very much eager to move closer to Europe, expect from the EU, it's things like being allowed to travel to Europe without a visa or free trade agreements.